was the one pushing buttons, Dole's outburst to Brokaw focused all attention on him and his unsportsmanlike behavior. Atwater, a genius at one-upmanship, now stood back. Dole could only respond with more sourness, compounding the problem and leading to electoral suicide. The easiest types to one-up are those who are rigid. Being rigid does not necessarily mean being humorless or charmless, but it does mean being intolerant of anything that breaks their code of acceptable behavior. Being the target of some anarchic or unconventional antic will trigger an overreaction that makes them look sour, vindictive, unleaderlike. The calm exterior of the mature adult is momentarily blown away, revealing something rather peevish and puerile. Do not discourage such targets from getting personal. The more bitterly they protest and criticize you, the worse they look. They forget that the real issue is how they are perceived by the people around them, or in an electoral race by the public. Inflexible to the core, they can be induced to make mistake after mistake with the slightest push. 5. In 1939, Joan Crawford, 1904 to 1977, talked her way into a relatively minor role in the film The Women, the lower-class perfume salesgirl who steals the husband of an elegant woman played by Norma Shearer. Crawford and Shearer were also bitter rivals in real life. Shearer was the wife of the movie producer Irving Thalberg, who always managed to get her the best parts. Crawford hated her for that, and for her haughty manner. Thalberg had died in 1936, but to Crawford's disgust, the studio was still pampering Shearer. Everyone in Hollywood knew of their mutual dislike and was waiting for the showdown. But Crawford was the consummate professional on the set, and she kept matters civil. The Crawford and Shearer characters in The Women share only one scene, the climax of the movie when Shearer finally confronts Crawford about the affair with her husband. The rehearsal went well, as did the master shot showing the two actresses performing together. Then it came time for close-ups. Of course, Norma Shearer went first. Crawford sat in a chair off camera, delivering her lines to Shearer. Many actors would have an assistant or the director feed the lines while they retired to their dressing rooms, but Crawford always insisted on reading them herself. Crawford was knitting an afghan at the time, and as she said her lines, she knitted furiously, then stopped when it was time for Shearer to respond. She never looked Shearer in the eye. The needles made a loud clicking sound that began to drive Shearer crazy. Straining to stay polite, Shearer said, "Joan, darling, I find your knitting distracting." Pretending not to hear, Crawford kept knitting. Finally, Shearer, a woman famous for her elegance, lost control. She screamed at Crawford, ordering her off the set and back to her dressing room. As Crawford walked away, still not looking at Shearer, the film's director, George Cukor, ran to her side, but Shearer commanded him to come back. Her voice had a bitter tone that no one there had heard before, and few would forget. It was so unlike her. Or was it? In 1962, Crawford and Bette Davis, longtime stars who had never appeared in the same movie, were finally to co-star in Robert Aldrich's film Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. Crawford and Davis had never been thought to like each other too much, but Crawford had encouraged the pairing. As good publicity, it would help to extend their careers. Once again, their behavior was civil on set, but after the film came out, it was Davis, not Crawford, who was nominated for a Best Actress Oscar. Worse, she immediately started crowing about it, proudly announcing that she would be the first actress to win 3 Oscars. Crawford had only 1. Davis was the center of attention at the Oscars. Backstage before the event, she was unusually gracious to Crawford. After all, she could afford to be. This was her night. Only 3 other actresses were nominated, and everyone expected Davis to get it. Crawford was equally polite. During the ceremony, however, as Davis stood in the wings, waiting, she hoped, to accept the award, she got a shock. She lost. Anne Bancroft won for her role in The Miracle Worker. And there was more. As Davis stood taking it in, she felt a hand on her arm. "Excuse me," said Crawford, as she strode past the stunned Davis to accept the award on Bancroft's behalf. The Oscar winner could not be there that night. On what was supposed to be Davis's night of glory, Crawford had somehow stolen the limelight, an unbearable affront. Interpretation. A Hollywood actress has to be thick-skinned, and Joan Crawford was the quintessence of the Hollywood actress. She had a huge capacity to absorb and deal with insults and disrespect. Whenever she could, though, she plotted to get the last laugh on her various nemeses, leaving them humiliated. Crawford knew that people thought of her as somewhat of a bitch, a tough, even unpleasant woman. She felt this was unfair. She had been kind to many, but she could live with it. What annoyed her was how Shearer got away with playing the elegant lady, when in fact Crawford believed she was a nasty specimen beneath her charming exterior. So Crawford maneuvered to get Shearer to expose a side of herself that few had seen. Just that glimmer was memorable to the Hollywood community and humiliating to Shearer. With Davis, it was all in the timing. Crawford ruined her night of glory, which she had been gloating about for months, without even saying a mean word. Crawford knew that Bancroft would be unable to attend and learned from inside information that she would win, so she happily volunteered to accept the prize on her behalf. You will often find yourself nursing the desire to revenge yourself on those who have mistreated you. The temptation is to be direct, to say something honest and mean, to let people know how you feel. But words are ineffective here. A verbal spat lowers you to the other person's level, and often leaves you with a bad feeling. The sweeter revenge is an action that gives you the last laugh, leaving your victims with a sense of vague but corrosive inferiority. Provoke them into exposing a hidden, unpleasant side to their character, steal their moment of glory. But make this the battle's last maneuver. That gives you the double delight of showing you are no one to mess with and inflicting a wound that sticks around. As they say, revenge is a dish best served cold. Reversal. Sometimes outright war is best, when, for example, you can crush your enemies by encirclement. In the ongoing relationships of daily life, though, one-upmanship is usually the wiser strategy. It may sometimes seem therapeutic to outfight your rivals directly. It may sometimes be appealing to send an overtly intimidating message. But the momentary gains you may earn with a direct approach will be offset by the suspicions you arouse in your colleagues, who will worry that someday you will strong-arm them too. In the long run, it is more important to secure good feelings and maintain appearances. Wise courtiers always seem to be paragons of civilized behavior, encasing their iron fist in a velvet glove. Here are further reflections on the strategy of one-upmanship. By Baltasar Gracian. Life is war against the malice of men. From the Strategies of Psychotherapy, by J. Haley. First of all, a complete definition of the technical term one-upmanship would fill, and in fact has filled, a rather large encyclopedia. It can be defined briefly here as the art of placing a person one down. The term one down is technically defined as that psychological state which exists in an individual who is not one up on another person. To phrase these terms in popular language, at the risk of losing scientific rigor, it can be said that in any human relationship, and indeed among other mammals, one person is constantly maneuvering to imply that he is in a superior position to the other person in the relationship. This superior position does not necessarily mean superior in social status or economic position. Many servants are masters at putting their employers one down. Nor does it imply intellectual superiority, as any intellectual knows who has been put one down by a muscular garbage collector in a bout of Indian wrestling. Superior position is a relative term which is continually being defined and redefined by the ongoing relationship. Maneuvers to achieve superior position may be crude,